Happy Friday, and welcome to another episode in our walk through the Bible, one book, one verse at a time. Today we're looking at the book of Habakkuk, or Habakkuk, depending on where you're from. Now, the book of Habakkuk is a bit of an interesting book in terms of prophecies. It's a prophecy that is a record of essentially Habakkuk's conversation with God, and it actually doesn't address, or nor is it addressed to any particular place, right? Most of the other prophets address their prophecies towards either someone that is outside of the people of God, to say Nineveh, or to Babylon or the nations around, while at the same time maybe applying it to Israel, the northern tribe, or Judah, the southern tribe. And in the midst of this, here we have Habakkuk simply having a conversation with God. Now, the book opens up with a complaint, as Habakkuk doesn't see God active in the world. He's complaining about all the unrighteousness, all the injustice, all the bad things that are happening. He says, how long are you going to allow this to continue? And God answers him and says, well, actually, I'm not going to allow it to continue very much longer. I'm going to punish those who have been doing these things, and I'm going to end the nation of Judah with the people of Babylon. So he essentially says, I'm going to use this nation of Babylon to exact justice on the people of Judah. But that brings up another complaint from Habakkuk. At that point, Habakkuk basically says, the Babylonians, how could you? They're even worse. That doesn't make any sense. And God basically says, well, it might not make sense to you, but this is what I am doing. And just as I was patient with Judah and allowed things to go on for a long time, so I might be patient with the Babylonians as well. But judgment and justice will come at some point. And the book essentially ends with a prayer where Habakkuk reminds himself of all the amazing things that God has done and how he has been true to his promises before. And so then he commits himself to continuing to rejoice in God and to trust that he will be true to his promise, even though he doesn't see it. This brings us to the key verses in Habakkuk chapter 3, verse 17 and following. He says, though the fig tree does not bud, and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my Savior. Now, as I was preparing this little video for you, I was amazed at God's timing. Because here in the book of Habakkuk, we get this invitation to rejoice in God no matter what is happening around us, no matter what the circumstances are around us. And this is exactly the time frame that we're going to start a new series this coming Sunday, when we're basically looking at exactly that as we look through the book of the Philippians and we think about what joy we have in Jesus because of what he has done for us. Now, if I had tried to plan this out, there's no way I would have been able to. I mean, we started a long time ago and there's been breaks in between time. I would have never been able to plan this all out. And yet here we see God's timing just in this little thing. And this happens all the time for us when we're attentive and we see it. So even though we may not always be able to see how God's timing is perfect, maybe we can learn to trust that it is, while still complaining to him and while still recognizing that he does listen to us and he will come through on his promises.